Recording in progress.
There we go. Spiritual grid. Well, my friends, it's really good to be back. It's been since mid-June, I think I said, since I've been here. That's normal for those of you that are new to the congregation or visiting. In the summer, I usually have a study time, a planning time, spend more time at home. I'm here maybe during the week, but it's a time to read and reflect and get ready to plan the year. You also should know and probably are aware that I started with a new congregation in Waukesha. So this summer wasn't quite as calm as normal because there was a lot of orientation and getting used to that congregation. One of the things I usually do in the summer, I don't get to read a lot, like full books kind of thing, during the year. So I save them up for the summer. And so this summer, it turns out I only got to read really one book, because that's the way life rolls sometimes. And it's this book. You can see it on the screen, but I have it here. It's Grit, The Power of Passion and Perseverance. Now, it was written by Dr. Angela Duckworth. She's quite amazing. She was a 2013 MacArthur Fellow, professor of psychology at the University of Pennsylvania, and founder and CEO of Character Lab. It's a nonprofit whose mission is to advance the science and practice of character development. I love that. You can find her if you want to get more information at characterlab.org. So I just wanted to give credit that everything is really based on, or the beginning of the sermon anyway, is based on her research. So I started the book, and I got pulled in right away, just in the very first chapter, because it talked about her research project when she was in graduate school. She, and I assume a few others, were hired by the United States Military Academy at West Point, particularly the admissions office. So I'll give you the background of why they hired her. To get into West Point, I mean, we all know West Point's pretty prestigious, but I had no idea what it took to get in. You have to start the application in 11th grade. You have to have outstanding high school grades and top scores in the standard college entrance tests. You have to have a recommendation from either a member of Congress, a U.S. senator, or the vice president. And you have to have superlative marks in fitness tests. It said that almost every applicant was the president of some sports team in their high school. So first of all, you have to be one of those kind of people. If you make it that far, they get 14,000 applicants every year. They wade through them, and I'm not sure what criteria they're looking at, but it only ends up with 4,000 get to move beyond at that point. And then only 2,500 are actually interviewed. So after the interviews, only 1,200, which is 8.6% of the number of applicants, are admitted and enrolled. So think about that. But yet, 1 in 5, 20% of those enrolled drop out before graduation. And the largest percentage of those drop out in the very first summer before school begins, because they have an intensive 7-week training program named Beast Barracks, or just BEAST for short. And in the book, it goes into all the things they have to do. It's basically a boot camp. So obviously, that's rigorous. And it's a lot to get through. And then if you've made it that far and drop out, that's a lot of energy for the person who applied and got accepted. And also they're taking a spot for somebody else who might have been successful. And the administration and the admissions office has to put a lot of work into this. So they wanted to try to get a handle on how they could predict who would be successful in this program. And that's why Dr. Duckworth and their team was hired. They wanted to understand the determining factors behind this phenomenon so they could come up with better ways to do it. So she did a lot of research. She poured through a lot of data. West Point had been working on this problem for quite a number of decades, actually. So they had other research they could look at, interviews with students and that kind of thing, and kind of categorize it all. And she finally came up with what she called the GRIT scale, which was composed of 4 psychological assets she would measure via questionnaires and interviews. They're kind of common sense, frankly. The first one was passion or interest. You have to have a passion for what you're doing to have grit, so it means intrinsically enjoying what you're doing. The second one, also a P, perseverance. She kind of said, well, basically it boils down to practice. Are you the kind of person that's going to get up every day and practice the same thing over and over and over again so that you can be better than you were the day before? Perseverance. And then purpose. You have to believe that whatever you're doing is worth it and has a purpose in life, in your life at least, right? And then she said the fourth one was hope, which really surprised me because she said it means rising to the occasion. It's a kind of perseverance. But then she went on to say hope is not actually a separate asset, but permeates through all the others. To have that kind of passion, perseverance, and purpose, you have to approach life with hope that you can succeed, that it's all worth it. Well, then over the years, in the book, the first half of the book is pretty much, one research study after another and things she looked at to kind of prove her point. And so she extended it out to all kinds of different situations and finally decided that the grit scale was pretty universal in predicting success regardless of the endeavor, whether it's a nonprofit, a captain of industry, a minister, a school teacher, it didn't matter what it was. Then she went on and had a chapter about each one, and the one that I really honed in on was hope, because this really surprised me in her research. And she goes on to talk about hope, and it really is about sources of hope. And she categorized it down to two mindsets, a fixed mindset and a growth mindset. And fixed mindset it's basically a conversation in your head that's saying, I'm just the way I am, or it's just this way. And she anecdotally talked about growing up in her home. It was a very patriarchal home, and her father, you were never good enough, is basically what it is. So not just her and her sister, anybody he met was not smart enough, not a genius. He always had to put everybody else down. And so this was the kind of home environment that she had to go up against. In fact, in the preface of the book, she talks about the moment it was announced that she got that fellowship. She said, well, take that, Dad, kind of thing. She was much more polite about that, right? So, geniuses usually get these fellowships, right? And I think he said, I'm proud of you. So she finally got something from him. But that was the fixed mindset. But then she pointed out that in her case, it was a growth mindset, that she would come back at it and say, I can beat this. I can chase this down. So that was really the gist of her research that I wanted to share with you today, and I'm going to go to full screen. So I guess the question is, and I seem to be drawn to these kind of statistical books. I think if I had it to do over, I would have been a data researcher, market researcher, but here I am. So I'll try not to make it dry. So why is this worth talking about in a pulpit, in a fellowship, in a religious institution? Well, the first reason is because my son Alex recommended the book. So my son Alex is a new psychiatrist. He's doing his residency at the University of Minnesota Hospitals right now. And he came and gave me this book and another one, which is a little too dense for me. But this one, and he had the note in it that said, psych research has demonstrated that religiosity is protective against mental health disease. One part is connection to a community, but another part is an improved grit score due to belief in a higher power or plan. Now, this kid is born and raised UU and still is, so he comes from kind of our background. And so I thought it very fascinating that that's how he talked about this book. So I thought, okay, I'm going to definitely read it because he recommended it. That looks fascinating. And then, as I said, I got really drawn in because of this observation of hope as being one of the drivers. And in my mind, hope is typically something that has to do with spiritual matters, not scientific facts at a military academy. And immediately when I saw that quote about hope, I was taken back to the early, it's like the second or third year of seminary. Part of what we had to do was be a chaplain for 6 months. And I was a chaplain in an elder care facility in West Dallas. It's a western suburb of Milwaukee, all levels of care. And they had 4 chaplains on staff, so they were a teaching school. And there were 4 students. It was me, and this was deliberate that it was diverse. I was the Unitarian Universalist. My best friend in this group was the Hasidic rabbi. There was another one who was African American Pentecostal, and then another one that was from, I think, the UCC, more of a mainline Christian denomination, was already a chaplain, but kind of needed the certification. And it turns out his personal theology was probably a little bit more conservative than the mainline denomination. So it was just the 4 of us. It was quite an interesting experience. And one of the first classes we were in, we needed to talk about each of our backgrounds and what do our people believe and why is that. And I said, well, in Unitarian Universalism, we're more universalist in what we see as sacred and what we see as religion. We think that all religions have a purpose and they help our individual journeys for truth and meaning. And I think he asked me some question or something, and I said, yeah, no, not everybody believes in Jesus as the Christ, probably very few if you're with us. And there's also a lot of people who don't even believe in God. And he was kind of stunned. And immediately out of his mouth, he said, well, if you don't believe in Jesus and you don't believe in God, where is hope? And I was stunned, like stunned into silence. I didn't know how to respond to that one. And I had to think it through a minute because by then I was died at my lowest cells as Unitarian Universalist, and I had forgotten that that is the religion I originally came from, that hope was always coming from a source. It was external. And I thought, no, it's internal. It's the way we are. So that was one reason I was really drawn into this and wanted to bring it to you today. I think most of all, it's because for a long time now, I've believed and I'm convinced that Unitarian Universalists have unrelenting hope. We are always optimistic, even in the face of growing cynicism and the divisive rancor that we've had in the last couple of decades. We are always out there. We show up. We do things. We somehow are convinced that our passion and our perseverance for building a better world has a purpose. So I kind of dubbed that as the title of this sermon, Spiritual Grit, that we have spiritual grit. It's kind of this audacious hope that Unitarian Universalists are known for. So why do we have this unwavering optimism? What is our source of hope? I think at the core of it, and I'm obviously open for discussion at the coffee hour on this one, these are my thoughts. We have hope in the evolution of humanity, or at least I do. And I think back the American Transcendentalists and the Unitarian minister Theodore Parker that came up with the quote that has been used over and over again by Martin Luther King Jr. and Obama, is the moral arc of the universe ultimately bends towards justice, even though we can't see where it ends. That it was a profound statement about our faith. And it's not just justice, it's to me utopia, paradise. We believe that humanity is going to get there eventually, and it may be rough along the way, and we can push it a little bit to get there. But it's this philosophy and hope that Unitarians and Universalists have had since the beginning in the United States that stems directly from the Age of Enlightenment in Europe. It's in our religious DNA. And then furthermore, I think we believe in evolution of the universe and a faith that also evolves. It's a living tradition. That's why it says so on our hymnal, right? The music of the living tradition, or some title like that. I'm sorry, I don't remember exactly. Unlike my fellow student chaplain, our faith is not tied to ancient scripture and tradition, which requires our adherence. There's a lot of faiths out there, and I know you know it, where they see something happen and their interpretation of it, in my opinion, needs to be twisted so it fits into what they are holding to be true since the dawning of our civilization, as opposed to Unitarian Universalism, which our theology is very organic and proudly adjusts as the world evolves. Now, that's fine. It also opens us up to probably making more mistakes along the way as well. But that, again, is just part of growth. I think we think of a universe which ultimately does tend towards harmony, seeks harmony in all things. A universe in which we are co-creators, we have agency, we can help it along. I think we have a belief in authenticity and possibility, not rigidity and confinement. We are, I just had a flashback to my mother in my little Lutheran church on her knees, kneeling, talking about forgiveness for her original sin. My quote here is, "We are not cursed. We don't believe in original sin. We're not pawns in some supernatural endgame. Although belief in the metaphor of a higher power or plan, like my son referred to, may be comforting and helpful, and I know a lot of us have that, ultimately, I don't think we rely on it as our source of hope, like my fellow student chaplain. We believe that we must rely on ourselves and that we can make a difference." And then as we've been talking the last 5 years about our 7 principles and morphing into the 6 values and what really is at the core of our faith, I think it's brilliant that they named it as love, because I think that's true. We believe in always centering love in our lives. And if you think about it, love is hope in action. Therefore, through love, hope sort of becomes a verb. And loving ourselves is the first one. Loving ourselves and not letting others or the misfortunes of life turn us against ourselves. And then loving the hell out of the world with all its mistakes and diversity, it leads to unrelenting hope for a better future. So I want to go back to Duckworth again. At the very end, she talked about hope again, and she talked about this fixed mindset and growth mindset. So it really narrowed down into what is our source of hope? Well, that's why I did that long reading from Anne Lamott. You're probably thinking, when is he ever going to get to that, or what was that for, other than it was a beautiful piece of poetry? It struck me when I found it, and I said, oh my gosh, this comes alive with us and us here now. She suggests a growth mindset and does so in a very poetic way. Let me unpack what I read earlier. She reminds us that the things fueling both pessimism and hope are strong and persuasive. Quote, "Life is way wilder than I'm comfortable with. I worry myself sick about the melting ice caps, the escalating arms race, and the polluted air, as I look forward with hope to the cleansing rains, the coming spring, the warmth of summer." And I love that she threw in the student marches, as if that's equal with the warmth of summer and the coming spring. It probably is. I love it. Then she goes on and says, "Life is more magnificent, more deserving of awe, and I would add more benevolent, well-meaning, kindly." These are her favorite things, and she has other paragraphs in the poems where she talks about them, but waves and particles, redwoods. How many of you have ever been in the redwood forest? If that isn't awe-inspiring, it's unbelievable. Poetry, the world of wonders and suffering, and it's funny that she puts suffering, she's always balancing it out, right? And then she says, right after suffering, great crowds of helpers and humanitarians. Here we are alive right now together. It's as if she's saying, we have a choice, folks. All of this is real and poignant, and we need to engage with both. We're not Pollyannas or live in a bubble. And ultimately, Unitarian Universalists choose the great crowds of helpers and humanitarians and awe and hope. And then she closes with this, which reminds me of Open Circle. We have all we need to come through. Against all odds, no matter what we've lost, no matter what messes we've made over time, no matter how dark the night, we offer and are offered kindness, soul, light, and food, which create breadth and spaciousness, which create hope sufficient for the day. So I think Lamott says it well, and I'm so glad I found this poem because I think Open Circle does it well. This is the message of hope we embrace here. This fellowship is a strong source of spiritual grit. Well done, and carry on, because we need it more than ever now. Amen. Let's take a moment just to reflect on that.